Hi everyone, and hi Rattati. See, now
Hello.
perfect. So chat, let me make sure, since I don't do a lot of these interviews and having other people on stream. So let me know if volume and picture and everything is working well. We are incredibly honored to have CCP Rattati on today. Rattati, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. My pleasure. Always fun to do these things.
So I'm guessing since we typically do like an economics and trading stream, most people know who CCP Rattati is. But for those that are joining us today and may not know why I'm so excited to have him on, Rattati, I'm gonna try my hand at a 2-sentence introduction, and maybe you can then fill in the rest. So Rattati started as a financial analyst at CCP, actually. And he was the senior producer at Dust 514 at some point. He then became the lead producer for ecosystems until the end of 2020. And then it seems like you got a promotion recently. You're going to have to fill us in on that, Rattati, but you are now called Director of Product. Maybe fill in the rest and let us know what your job now actually entails.
Yep. You got it right for sure. Started in 2007 as an analyst. Worked on as basically director of finance and planning with World of Darkness, Dust 514, Eve. So worked a lot with the senior management teams across basically the world. Moved to Shanghai, worked on Dust 514. Then I worked on a couple of more shooters that were cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Unfortunately.
unfortunately, it was a lot of fun, a lot of learnings, and worked a lot on economy, monetization, progression, and pure gameplay on Dust 514. And a lot of the experience I brought over to ecosystem, and kickstarted a lot of projects with the teams there: Talos, Axiom, and Batcave. And you know probably Talos the best, but Axiom is kind of a systems foundation, industry, resources, etc. And Batcave is mostly anti-cheat.
Okay. Cool.
On the new role, yes, we did a slight reorganization, and yes, my title is now Director of Product, which means that the rest of the segments are also product managed by me, I would say. So I set up the strategy, roadmaps, working on opportunity discovery, etc., with all of the teams throughout all of the community. We have a lot of interaction with the community. Camille, our senior community manager, he gives us an update. We get all kinds of information from all kinds of places, and it's my responsibility to prioritize these opportunities and try to fold them into either quadrants or non-quadrant features and development.
Cool. So is your team entirely in Iceland then, or is your team spread out globally?
So almost all of the Eve team is in Iceland today.
Okay.
We have a couple of people working remote, but that's mostly circumstantial in that sense.
Nice.
And
And
here we have CCP Dog.
nice. That making an appearance in the background. That's sweet. Cool. So you mentioned your team, and you mentioned you get a lot of information drawn into your team. I asked my my community for to submit questions beforehand, and so we collected some of them. And one of the questions that was actually asked a lot was, so when we talk about ecosystem, that has a lot of components, right? It has a little bit of economics, as you said anti-cheating. That all falls kind of into the ecosystem, right? How can we if we imagine how your team is working, do you guys have veto power on things? Do changes originate from your team? How can we imagine you guys working?
So we have segments, and one of those segments is ecosystem. So ecosystem was built in really a way like a living ecosystem is. You have your inorganic, you have your natural laws, you have basically the space where organisms live, then you have resources, and then we model ourselves also after what if we introduce now a new species into this ecosystem, like a ship or changed ship. And there are always consequences that happen. Sometimes they're a bad change for the ecosystem, sometimes they're a good one. We have to resource manage. Are people going to run out of this resource, or are there enough predators? Is there enough prey to make this balanced? And it's kind of an analogy, but it's really works really well. So that's one segment, ecosystem, and we're also improving that. There's some changings there. We're trying to improve that kind of segment in a way that we fold in more about the universe itself. So we're actually in kind of Bedger and I, CCP Burger, are working on a concept called the living universe, which is everything that's going on in the universe. So we've this tug of war between the empires. Where does all the mining, where the NPCs do? Like, where does it go? Do they build something eventually? Like, to create this kind of way more a dynamic universe with inputs and outputs, and players are just one part of that input output. So they could basically help on help one faction or the other achieve their goals. So it's kind of like Civilization, empires that have their own motives and they want to do things, and you're just there in their way. So that's kind of the vision for that, and ecosystem is a big part of it. But we're also thinking more about how do we take this forward? How do we create these asteroids and weather patterns that Berger presented last TenFest? So kind of taking the universe a step further into the science fiction. The rest of the company is split into, or Eve is into more segments. One of which is basically the academy, where we're like the sole focus is try to get new players into the game. So now we have redoubled our efforts into that. We've never had more people working on the academy and the new player experience, and hopefully we'll start seeing and sharing results around that in 2021.
Okay. The other thing that everyone associates with Rattati is the scarcity phase, right? And or more positively, the resource redistribution, if you want to put it that way, right? In our chat, in our community, that is one of the main topics that we talk about, because it has massive implications on the market, right? And the economy, and pretty much everything you do in game. Can you give us an indication of how well you think the whole scarcity measure is working? And maybe to everyone that is joining that has been living under a rock and that doesn't know what I'm on about when I say scarcity phase, it's basically, in my words, and correct me, Rattati, it's coming out of an era of abundance in Eve, where lots of stockpiles and many resources were amassed, and now moving into an ecosystem that's much more impacted by austerity, or characterized by austerity and scarcity. So how well is it working? Are you generally content with the way that's going?
I am content with how it's going, and you described it pretty well. There were a lot of, I would say, symptoms of a bad economy a year and a half ago, which had been going on for longer than that. When I joined Eve, I actually took 100 days to write a manifesto of what I thought needed to be fixed, and we're going pretty quickly through that list and getting some results. Some of 2021 is still part of that manifesto, kind of things I really want to get done. But ultimately, capital proliferation, we've done a lot to kind of combat that, both with making it harder to build them, and also just to make them more vulnerable, as you remember.
Mm.
What we hear from the community is actually that the balance is really good, like between the rock paper scissors or the play counterplay in the fleet fights that we're looking at today. So I'm actually very happy about that. Obviously, I'm not happy about having to kind of take the reins of this and cull these kind of activities, because no one really wants to. But we deemed it and still deem it very important and necessary.
You're the bad cop.
I think it's going to be, we're going to be fine. I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and definitely there's one, I would say, big change to be made, which is coming soon. It's not a bad change, but it's a drastic change for sure, and it's going to change the landscape a bit for a lot of people. But then I think we're ready just to kind of start redistribution, getting things into the right places, allow players to build up more of their empires and infrastructure to actually kind of customize their experience. That's where we need to get, and where we want to get, and I think it's not that far away.
So that sounds like we haven't seen the worst yet. And when I say the worst, I mean the worst from a players that like cash point of view.
From a cash perspective, I think we're closing in on something really interesting. So reserve banks that we know about have been part of the ESS system now since it was launched. And I'm not going to tell you how much is in the ESSs, but it's a lot. And the reserve banks will definitely be coming online this year. And with that, a veritable fountain of ISK will be made available to those who want to take it. So it's there for the taking, for sure. That's one. We're also working on improved mining, or basically kind of improved landscape for mining. And that's going to just be a positive change that's coming soon. And I think that would be like a pleasant surprise when that's out here. And I think it's going to be kind of the big first steps of real positive things to come.
Okay. It sounds promising. What I was taken aback a little bit by is when you have your little the scorecard, right, on the ecosystem outlook in the dev blog, and on the economy in the last dev blog that was out in at the end of the year last year, you gave yourself a C coming from D in the economy, which would indicate to me that the redistribution phase where we're going to see more minerals out there again to be mined is quite far away, because just from my logic I would think that's coming at A or triple A, which is the highest grade. Can you take my worries away from me?
So I think the D to C means that we were gaining against stockpiles, and we were reining in the ISK, basically, ISK generation. We are obviously seeing that ISK is moving from bounties into incursions, red and blue loot, and that's fine. We knew that would happen. But redistribution doesn't have to wait for A or AAA in that sense. That would mean that a part of getting it from C to B would actually to be start redistribution, is to get like the economy in a healthier state. So is there some mineral missing? Do we still have too much of a mineral? Like now we're into fine tuning, in my opinion. So right now we are starting to do much smaller incisions in that sense. We're using the scalpel now instead of the sledgehammer.
Okay. And so you have a good visibility on stockpiles and their sizes?
Sure. That's we have all of the stockpiles of all material ships and everything.
And you the reduction in stockpiles that you have seen over the past year that this has been going on, right? Is that like you expected? So is that how you expected them to go down, or is it slower or faster, or?
So the war helped, for sure, but I would say that when we started this journey, I was taken aback at the proliferation. If you look at Titans both built and supercarriers built, it's a hockey stick. It is a crazy change over time, because it used to be just like a manageable number, like in the hundreds. But all of a sudden we had thousands and thousands of supercarriers everywhere. And that to me was like, okay, that's a huge symptom, and that's just not sustainable at all. And now we're kind of culling back a bit, but we're still going to be in that situation that the haves and the have-nots, the people who have supercarriers and haven't lost them, won't need to build them. But if they lose them, it's going to be harder for them to rebuild them, which means that they may not commit them as easily as they used to, and that maybe becomes a deterrent enough to actually like not be able to scare people into submission, which was happening regularly back in the day. So we still have N+1 as a problem, but this is where we start. And what we'd like is a healthier, I would say, subcap, smaller capital fleet meta, which is actually happening in the war currently. We're seeing a lot of battleships. We're seeing a lot of stuff that we weren't seeing before.
And are you clear on what caused the hockey stick in the first place, and on how to prevent that happening in the future?
So there's a huge change back in the day. I can't remember exactly when it happened, but there was a massive multiplication of tritanium that happened, where I think it went up by 100-fold or 1,000-fold. The yield, I think there's a big meaningful change that happened, and the problem is that I would say I don't think anyone foresaw that Titans would ever be common, and I think that's why there were no fail safes in the materials needed to build Titan. So the problem is that Titan's are a T1 ship, and I would say that is one of the kind of the fundamental design problems that led us into this. If we had some other way to control it, we wouldn't have run into this. We would have kind of had like a handbrake or manual brake somewhere in during that phase. But I think that's one way to think about it, is that kind of unlocked this titanium growth, Titan growth, and supercarrier growth, and we'll just see how we kind of deal with that.
So dynamic resource distribution is going to rein that in the future?
So I think ultimately, if we would allow this to happen again, it would be at the cost of some trade-offs. So if you wanted titanium in your nullsec system, and I think CCP Psych has explained this before, is if you want this power to be able to build whatever in your system, you're also sacrificing something at that. You're trading, I don't know, Noxium for titanium or something. So yes, maybe you'll be able to build this type of ship in your system, but maybe not all of the ships all the time.
Okay. Are there reactions to the austerity phase or scarcity phase that surprised you? I mean, I think it's absurd to think that you would know exactly what would happen, as some people expect you to, right? Because this is something that has never happened, not in this ecosystem, and it's difficult to apply experiences from other games to EVE, because EVE is unique. But we've seen things like so basic minerals exploded in price now. They exploded to never before seen levels. But we also saw lately, we saw PI prices drop, and that's not only due to scarcity, it's also due to less structures in space. But we also saw a lot of the salvage goods drop in price drastically. There's a ton of material groups that had their prices drastically changed, and as a result of behavior changes by the player base, and a lot of it due to scarcity. Did you anticipate that? Did that surprise you? What surprised you most? Can you talk about that?
Specifically, no, we didn't like plan on or try to project which prices would go up or down. We are approaching this as a very dynamic ecosystem, so it's almost impossible to predict what players do and whatnot. What we really just wanted to prevent were any kind of exploits, any insurance scams, any reprocessing like loopholes or things like that. Those are the things that we're mostly concerned about, and I think we haven't seen any of these happen or be manifest. Obviously, the CPI was going to go up, like that was pretty clear, but that also creates value for the resource providers over time, as long as the people buying have purchasing power through ISK. So that's where we're kind of okay. We've now pushed the kind of the value generation and the recipients of that value over to raw resources. So ultimately, PI, titanium, like all of that stuff should be able to increase in value as long as we have the ISK coming in. And we needed to kind of rein that in to see where the kind of the breaking point was, just to measure, okay, what is a healthy income, what is a non-healthy income, and that's why we did the implemented DBS, and that has been a really, really strong contender for like how we do features from now on. It is one of the first dynamic systems that we have in Eve. It basically listens to player input and gives output straight into the server. It's kind of also new tech that we're doing, where you actually take input from the server. It's not calculated on the server, outside of the server, and then sent back into the server. So those things are actually the ways that we can increase performance. So trying to offload the monolith, as we call it, through external services. So one day market kill mails, these things are the way to kind of, we're pruning that away to try to increase the performance of the servers. So that's one. It's a huge step for the team. It's a huge step for Eve to actually do this, and that actually paves this way forward that I was talking about. Okay, are the empires then actually like, do they have their offline simulation in that sense? Like, does the emperor take all the things that they mine and they make decisions and they build things and then they attack the Caldari or whatever? Like, can we imbue the universe with this kind of like almost organism AI? And that's the future. Like, scarcity isn't the future. It's just like we need to do this right now to make sure that we haven't messed up the economy for forever. But this is the foundation for the third decade for Eve, is to actually become one of the like the most awesome economy simulation that like the world has. That is the vision for this the team, and I'm super interested in enthusiastic about how it's going.
So I've heard it before that that you or other developers are saying that dynamic systems are probably the way forward, right? I was going to ask this a little later, but since we're on dynamic systems, I'm into trading. Dynamic broker fees, right? Something you've thought about or haven't yet? Because trade is very, very centralized right now. Dynamic broker fees could be a solution to decentralized trading a little bit, maybe create a little bit more content. Is that an idea that you have thrown around, or not at all?
Oh, definitely. The system cost index is actually one of the like probably truly the first kind of dynamic system that is in Eve. So it's probably needs a bit of tuning. Like I don't like that almost everything is produced in one place in the universe. We could do something with that for sure. But I think all of these make sense. Dynamic broker fees for sure to kind of distribute, travel, logistics, hauling across the universe. And this centralization is, I would say, it's fine because that's what players wanted at that time. But if we incentivize different behaviors, people will adapt to those and actually be able to make more choices. I think we've been, where I have been actually doing some industry related Q&A inside the company. I'm talking to some expert industrialists at CCP just to kind of get their feedback. And this is actually very interesting to have your regional markets and your JITA or central market, and actually have to have a choice between these is really cool. And it's actually because of Niarja that like Amar is now becoming this kind of like a secondary trade hub, which is very interesting.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
definitely.
I talk about that a lot. In that latest ecosystem outlook, you talk about the further defining the differences between the 5 categories of space, and it sounds like you have something in the works for low sec and wormhole space. Low sec, something about the interaction with high sec, and wormhole space, something about the resources that come out of there becoming more valuable. Is there anything that you can share about that?
What I want to do is to make all of the areas lucrative and desirable to those that want to kind of take the chance. And I've heard enough that no one will ever mine in low sec or sentences like that. Of course they will, if the margins are high enough. So what we want to do is just incentivize players to be everywhere, and if that means creating very specific content or desirable content for them to be there, yes, that's definitely an option on the table. We know that there's a lot of interesting loot and ways to make money in wormholes, but also there are way fewer in some cases to make money. So we're looking at basically underutilized resources and try to kind of create demand for them in the industrial kind of cycle. So that goes for everything, and that's why Noxium has been placed directly in low sec as a thing. So if you need it, go into low sec and mine it. If there are few, then the prices are high, so it's good value for you. If they're low, then everyone's building from Noxium. The market saves itself in that sense. On that though, I think there's also just a case for making these lines pretty almost clear in that sense. I personally don't understand why you would, and I can't blame any reason or design decisions made back in the day. I wasn't here, and everything was done with the best interest in mind. I still think it's strange to build keep starts in high sec. That's like it just feels weird.
Yeah, that's a big one.
But
That's a big one.
I'm not saying that we're gonna remove them, but I just like those things. It feels like there's kind of the narrative that's weird to me, not the gameplay necessarily. And I know that the design intent was that everyone could build all structures, and they were priced in that way, and that's what the design was. But I still don't like agree with building mega space stations in someone's backyard, and that's just strange to me. And I know that Faction Warfare suffered for it because you had stations inside game systems or game features that weren't like kind of broke how they worked in that sense. But that's all fine. We can definitely figure out a way forward without hurting too many feelings.
I think nowadays everyone agrees, or most people agree. But then again, hindsight is 2020. I'm sure there were the best intentions. Also in that dev blog, is you're hinting at maybe a new role for oracles and orcas in mining. Is that something that? So I understand it as something that's definitely happening this year. Is that something that we're going to be seeing this quarter?
Depends on quarter. So
by March 31st.
Not by March 31st. No. we basically the things that we wanted to do in Q1 or quadrant 1 were the things that we've already delivered. So the Marauder Buff was something that I've personally had a vested interest in. It's something that one of the manifestos was that I didn't understand why this ship wasn't out there flying. It was kind of meant to be a monumental achievement. It was like a high-end subcap battleship T2. Like it was kind of like this should be flown, and it wasn't, and it just lacked a purpose. It had a purpose, but it wasn't able to actually deliver on that purpose. So now that we've strengthened that, I'm really happy to and see that being flown again. We're seeing a lot of the prices and demand go up, and way more flown in space. So it's definitely something that I'm very happy. I'm not I don't fly it myself, so don't worry. I'm not. I wasn't doing it for myself. It was just a kind of an anomaly almost in the data to see it, how kind of ill-received it was. Then the formations, that was something that Talos and the team were working on, and that's what we had for this quadrant. And what we're going into is really like a very exciting next quadrant for sure. Talos is taking a look at, I'm maybe like teasing a bit, but we're definitely taking a look at like a year in review, I would say. They're taking a look at some of the things that we changed last year, and maybe improving or tweaking or tuning those things, like particularly based on feedback, based on what we learned. So we're taking a second look at some of the changes. So more on that later. So it's kind of iteration, and I think that's something that we'd like to keep in mind, is that like either we do a gradual iteration pass, or both, like group them all up into one kind of big pack of fixes and tweaks.
Do you see an issue with the Rorqual and Orca roles as they are right now?
Yes and no. So what Rorquals were, so they did everything instead of doing one thing really well, and I think I'd like to go back to their original role, which would be fleet boosters. Same thing with Orcas. And that's kind of the high level vision for it, but we have some aces up our sleeves to give them like a special unique role. So that's, I'm going to save that surprise for later. But yeah, that's definitely happening in 2021 and soon.
I'm going to take that as Q2, but you don't have to answer that question. You said a year in a year in review. Well, I've been telling my my community that my bet was on Scarcity Phase ending in Q1 2021, and I'm about to lose that bet apparently. But then again, according to the dev blog, the redistribution phase has already started, except that it started very, very slowly.
Right? We iterate on the DBS, for example. So just buffed it across the board, playing with the numbers, and we're actually in a pretty healthy state. And the big thing about the DPS is that you can't be lazy. You can't just farm one system, and I think that was the like kind of the major improvement to our habits, your player habits. That ensures that people are traveling, they have to move, and yes, they can low cost or whatever, they can like do, what do you call it? Yeah, they can switch from one system to the next and wait and do this kind of round robin. But that means they're in space, and that means that maybe someone's watching them and attacking them, and it's not that predictable, and not as easy. It's not as easy to, I would say, maliciously do it at the same time. We're also seeing that the botting behavior has changed quite dramatically. You see that bots actually kind of diminish their system really quickly, so they become very identifiable unless they're smarter bot runners. So it's helping as a detection tool as well for us. So all in all, it's a really good way for us to actually make large scale improvements just by changing a single number. So we can change the how fast the diminishing returns works, what's the maximum bounty of if you leave it completely alone, etc. So we have a lot of dials to play with, and it's been really good. And it's affecting exactly the systems that we wanted. You can see that in the MER.
I guess what I'm trying to get at with the scarcity phase, or with people,
just from a mineral point of view,
from a from an ISK point of view, or ISK faucet point of view, then DBS would certainly be something. But then again, you're taking it away. If you have something like a preferred playstyle in EVE, then you're taking it away from miners and you're giving it away to ratters. In that case, even though probably overall the ISK faucet of the DBS is lower than the ISK faucet was before for ratting, for the more AFK style ratting.
For the major ratters, for sure. Not for the predominantly, like for the normal player, it shouldn't have changed a lot in nullsec.
Right.
Only
but miners, or those people that like to mine or want to mine are certainly still waiting for a change. Right?
Yeah, and I think we can safely assume that there are, the Rorqual and the Orca will be the first step into there will be some follow-up changes with that release.
Okay. You said a year in review. For me, a year in review would also mean that a year ago we had the market changes, almost exactly a year ago, with the dynamic broker changes, the margin trading change. I frequently call that the best patch, my favorite patch ever in EVE. But then again, I'm a market trader, and I think that change rewarded very strategic market trading instead of 0.01 isking. A lot of people disagree with me, so chat's gonna explode maybe. But what can you tell us about? I've talked to a CCP employee here and there, the community team. I've heard very positive things about what this did for scamming, maybe for botting. Can you share a little bit what a year in review for the market changes has meant to you, or what has it done to the economy from your point of view?
I would say that small scale normal marketeers have suffered probably. They're the kind of the group that took the biggest hit, I would say, like casual market players, and that's something we want to look at. The team is basically going through the feedback channels, and I'm very sure they'll come up with a couple of, or 3 or more ideas about how to improve their life, and not roll back the other changes that were very favorable. Definitely 0.1 is king, but it's just a much healthier counterplay, I would say. Market is PvP, industrial is PvP in some way. So we really want to remove unfair advantages everywhere, not just from space botting. It's also market botting and just a fair playground. But I don't have the details on that. That's going to be out relatively soon, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard some preliminary numbers from the community team, and they look very promising in terms of the scams and bot numbers going down on that.
So
yeah. And
actually,
I'm not a casual market trader, so that's why I like the trade, probably the change, probably.
So what I kind of missed from Dustbound 4 was to have these conversations with the community, where I would go onto the forums like in the olden days and kind of like pitch a couple of ideas and have a good discussion, harden the discussion, and come back with a improved feature proposal. I missed that. Like, I haven't been doing a lot of that. I've more been kind of monitoring feedback after the fact and kind of during during the kind of the final phases. We've always had the CSM give feedback, but like I really want to reintroduce this phase where the community can actually have good kind of honing of a feature. One thing that like everyone who's listening could actually like pitch into a forum thread or Reddit thread, whatever you favor, about the year in review, like about the Talos changes, and kind of come up with like what are actually 2 or 3 things that you do differently with wormhole changes, market changes, and actually just give us some good feedback, constructive good feedback, and I can guarantee that the team will read it.
Absolutely, and I can attest to the fact that I was asked to give feedback on some of the market changes. So there's definitely a lot of outreach happening. Obviously, I can only answer for myself, but that is something that is definitely happening more now than it used to be, I think. I dug up a quote from you from Reddit. I hope that's okay. Let's see. Is this from you? It says, Western monetization fails catastrophically in the East. In that case, Western monetization referring to, you know, the fair and balanced model where monetization is only for skins or for cosmetics, and Eastern being more pay to win. Do you still believe that? And what does that mean for EVE today?
Yeah, they're just completely 2 different cultures. One is way more accepting of being able to pay for advance in real money. The cultural aspect, I've lived in both places. The cultural aspect is just that you worked hard, you earned hard for your money, and you should be able to benefit from your hard work. In the West, obviously, completely different. I think we have a very clear idea of what pay to win is now in the West. I think there have been unfortunate monetization paradigms in a couple of games in the last 5-10 years. No need to name any names. They've probably served as really good kind of warning signs or red flags on what to do and what not to do. We're seeing this gambling being struck down, etc. And kind of the prevalence of battle passes, season passes, and the acceptance of those seems to be kind of like I've established a line where what is okay, what is not okay. And then you go into what is like the difference between a shooter or the niches or the genres of games. And I think we're like, I don't think there's a lot of landmines left in the world of monetization. I think we're very aware of them, and what we do on Eve is try to be really, really respectful of those. And I would be hesitant to say that we've done big mistakes in the last few years on that. We're always very sensitive to that. I'm personally, I'm very sensitive about, like, really loathe pay to win. So and we as a culture, a company culture, actually do too. And so there's not a lot of like crazy ideas going out that need to be struck down internally. It's more like it's all fairly reasonable, and we're trying to find the best way for the right people. And usually the best way to design monetization is to start from being helpful, try to find where we can actually assist the player in the best way possible, and not exploit them. And I think that's where we're trying to kind of gauge what is a good starter pack, what is a good like kind of kickoff point. And if you're interested in that, then that's your prerogative to use or not. Obviously, skins and cosmetics are another thing, but we're pretty well versed in that behavior.
Yet you're now owned by a Korean company. Has that had any impact on the policies that you institute in the game or on your monetization strategy?
Literally zero. I can guarantee that they have absolutely no, I would say, no desire nor shown any will in actually trying to affect any of our decision making, like literally zero, day to day, month to month, year to year. I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say, Pearl Abyss, the investment in CCP is, I would say, from my point of view, a strategic investment into learning what works well in Western societies. And I think as I'm going to say so many years, I'll never guess, 17 years? Is that the right?
Yeah.
MMO that's still going, we must have done something right. And I think that's what a company like Pearl Abyss can learn from us, and we can learn from them in the same way. They've done amazing MMOs in the East. Obviously, they've done things that are acceptable in their culture. But BDO is doing well in the West as well. It's a beautiful MMO. It's really well crafted. It's actually a fantastic MMO. So I think it's more of a strategic investment to learn about West and how long-running MMOs have done it. And I'm hoping we can actually help them grow their own games. But as a I would say, as a financial instrument, they are so much bigger than CCP is from a revenue forecast, from a revenue standpoint, from a company standpoint, that we're a drop in the ocean. And it's kind of obvious that they're not trying to force us to sell skill points for.
I mean, you make up you make up more than 10, more like 15% of the revenue. That's not a drop in the ocean.
I would say that maybe. I think they look at it differently, I would say.
Because they're leaving you alone. So is that the interaction is just once a quarter Hilmar has to go over there and report?
No, actually, it's very amicable. It's just not in any way controlling. We interacted with them regularly. We have Slack channels. We talk to a lot of the people. We talk to the Echoes team a lot as well. An amazing lead producer, or whatever he's called, Suwei on the Echoes team. Loves Eve. Has been playing Eve since like day one. Fanatical Eve player, and he has the Eve DNA for sure. Eve Echoes has done a lot of cool things and really good things, especially from a new player perspective. So a lot of kind of in biz speak cross-pollination of ideas, and we're just gaining from this cooperation in good ways for sure.
Speaking of monetization, so we just learned about the expert systems, right? I don't know how much that touches on the work you do, but then again, the work you do touches on basically everything in Eve, right?
Because I'm intimately involved. Yeah. Expert systems were coined from a very specific user problem, and there are ways to get around that for sure. I read the expert systems threads on both forums, and I don't disagree with a lot of things. We could make the skill system much easier to understand, but there's something about navigating these, I would say, these obstacles in the very beginning that have been pointed out. If you're not going to refactor the skill system, these would be interesting ways to do it. We definitely don't want to sell skill points. So that was basically the foundation, the design crutch was, okay, how can we help them without selling skill points? Okay, we can grant them temporary skills. And that's kind of the idea we went with, and say, okay, how do we allow you to fly something now, taste something now, instead of waiting? And players could skill inject, new players won't be able to understand that. And that's also our fault. So how do we get this into like, okay, can we get something cool, smart, very kind of digestible at a low price point that says, hey, just, okay, in your first session, you don't have to wait for anything. You don't have to come back tomorrow. What if you can just fly a mining barge or a small frigate with like a fitted frigate with like the bare necessities and say, okay, go out and fight. And the idea here was that how can we actually make a friend kind of take you out? So a friend says, okay, come join me. We're going to do this together. And instead of that friend saying, hey, let's see you in a week, get these skills started, and then play, what if you can just like drop a low price point and then fly with me today? In the meanwhile, you're actually trading towards that at the same time. So you're also learning a bit about what makes a fitting, like the concept of a fitting even. So you're like, okay, here's a bundle that kind of lets you fly now, is also kind of a skill plan, and also gives you some kind of a small, I would say, beacon of light to look up things, to train, to buy, to go study in the market, because you're fairly unguided in the market. So at least this is a starting point to say, okay, this actually works together, without community fittings and ghost fitting and that stuff. So that was the idea, and the idea obviously was passed through the CSM, and they gave us feedback on it. The main feedback was obviously like, don't go too far, like make it definitely new players. There shouldn't be an alliance doctrine that's being spun up, or fly a T2 battleship or Titan or supercarrier. So obviously the intent is here to have it low skill point investment, just to kind of get you started.
My challenge to the expert systems, and I actually I put a video on this out there, but you haven't seen it, so I'll try to summarize what I think about the expert system. So my challenge to that is, if the introduction of the expert system kind of suggests that what is holding the retention rate back is people missing some skills on day one or day two, right? It's that there isn't enough to do on day one or day two that they understand, and that is what's making them quit the game. And that is what I challenged, because I think that what's keeping people out of staying in the game, or what's kicking people out of the game, is not finding a corp, or not understanding the overview, or not not being able to play the game because it's not explained to them maybe in the way that most people understand, or only the most the most dedicated understand. And so to me, I didn't think that the expert systems are addressing the issue that's there. And obviously you have different numbers than I can look at, right? But to me, it sounds like it's addressing a problem that is not there. And then on top of that, if you put somebody in a mining barge, for example, it's to the day one player, it's not going to make a difference if it's a starter ship or a mining barge. Mining is going to be new to them, and the difference is not going to be how much ISK they make. The only difference is they're going to get blown up quicker, and they might leave even quicker. That was what I don't understand. What do you say to that?
I think it's very anticlimactic to join a game and say, I want to fly the ship. I can't now, but you have to wait. I think it's fairly different from what players expect to come into a new game at this day and age. I think it's very specifically Eve, and it's one of the things that make Eve really unique and interesting. But it is hard to grasp, to kind of have to wait, because you can't grind XP by just doing the activity. If you could, I think I'd be fine. But this kind of lack of progress, or the sense of progression, is a bit hard for new players. And this is very clear in our user testing, for example. So we have a lot of data, and definitely I don't disagree with all of the things you said. There are people who are lost because we don't explain the game well.
You're muted.
Definitely. Oh, sorry, I dropped here.
Yeah.
The overview is crowded and hard to understand, and that we definitely would like more players to join corporations day one, for sure. But not everyone is a corporation joiner. I'm not. Like, I would never join any corporation on day one, because a lot of people want to find build their self-confidence, and we call it stage fright. You want to do things on your own until you're ready to kind of not be mocked for your lack of knowledge. So there's a big group of players who just simply don't want social interactions in the first days or two. They just want to train, and they're fine with losing. Like it's fine. Like loss isn't the thing that drives people away. It's actually one of the things that make you kind of stick. Death in the first session of your first ship does not like lead to bad retention. It actually leads to the opposite. It's kind of like, okay, then you get it. Oh, okay, I die and then I go back to station and I just buy another ship. Okay, I'm poor, but that's fine because I can just like get money somehow. That's crafting, and people are used to it in MMOs, World of Warcraft or whatever. So I think that's not the problem. It's the problem of waiting. And to me, there's also this part of like dissatisfaction when you unlock the first ship and you think it's meaningful, but then you don't have any fittings and you don't know what to do next, and that lack of guidance. And I think that's what the expert system was in the beginning, was this kind of like skill plan. You just get the skill plan, it makes sense, it's kind of like a community fitting, but it's an object. And that was the basic kind of translation, the DNA of the design. And I think all of these will work together. That's my hope.
But aren't you worried that new players will log in and they will feel like it's required because you're offering it to them, and they feel like, oh, obviously I need to buy this because apparently I don't have what it takes to have fun on day one, which is absolutely not true, because I think there's a ton of things you can do on day one that are a lot of fun and especially are better for your learning curve in the long run if you don't buy into it.
Yeah, but I just put that into players' judgment. I play Warzone. I don't buy the battle pass even if I'm killed by the Grau. Like I don't need it. I can do whatever I want. And I think there are people who will enjoy this and people that won't. And I don't think, ultimately, I don't think it harms anyone that it exists in the way that it doesn't give you any power. It doesn't give you maybe perceived power. It doesn't give you any pay to win. It doesn't give you anything you couldn't before, because you could literally skill inject into this by plexing on day one if you wanted to. So I think it's more like a guiding hand, if you will.
Okay, I'll let you off the hook with that one. I have to ask a question that at least my community knows it's coming, because the most dreaded item for me is the Signal 25 Needlejack in the game, and I'll tell you why. Right? You
Definitely.
announced that item was coming out after the success of the initial filaments in the event, and then it basically everyone understood it as, Signal 5s are the easily they're everywhere. You can get them, you can use them, and then the 15s are like a rare blueprint, and then the 25s are only given out very rarely, because they are purple. They are they should be way more rare and more expensive than the 5s and the 15s. And then what happened is they were giving out to everyone as login rewards, and not the 5s, also the 5s, but then the 25s. And nowadays they're everywhere and they're worthless, just because obviously you thought they were great and they should be in the game in an economic sense. So for you as an ecosystems guy, that should be, that should, doesn't that hurt? Like, isn't that like you introduced, or I don't know about you personally, but the game introduced a clear way forward, but then login rewards kind of killed the market for an item that should have been rare, that could have been very, 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 very cool thing, and that is now everywhere, which is, by the way, also abundance, right? So it breeds complacency. And so up until then, the story is just, oh, I lost a whole bunch of money on Signal 25s because I bought a bunch of them, right? My question to you is, don't they ask you before they do a login reward? Because you would have told them that's a terrible idea to give that away, because you wouldn't. Why would you give out an item that is supposed to be rare? Because the Signal 15s, they're now basically, there's an item there that is not used, that the blueprint is worth nothing. It could have been cool.
Yes, this actually, like, this hasn't reached my my kind of purview in the last 6 months or so. We definitely signed off on the DLI, and I actually may have, like, I can't remember the details, but I really wanted some of these to be manufactured, some of them to be in the DLI, and some of them to be like casual for sure.
Nobody manufactures them because the 25s are cheaper than the 15.
Road to Hell is paid with good intentions. I think that may, like, again, there are things to look at on seeding for definitely. For example, I wasn't really aware of this like specific instance, and I'm happy to take a look at it. I think the part of putting into the DLI was to make sure that there was always an ample supply that was in players' hands. Maybe it should have been reversed. I can take a look, but it's been definitely a few months where no one really brought this up as an urgent thing. So this is the first that but it may be a lost opportunity, but like it could be fixed with some changes for sure.
I mean, nobody's going to complain, or most people, 99% of the player base is not going to complain about it because they like the item and it's in their pocket, and it does. And it I was more concerned about the fact that I would hope that these login rewards would be passed by you, because to be honest, the way that the way the login rewards are structured, while we're on that topic, the way they're structured right now, I don't think the community is happy about them, because they're speaking from myself and the people that I know, it's 99% trash. So you have a big pile of blueprints in your hangar that you're never going to use.
I obviously, we were in a tough place with the DLI, the veteran DLI for sure. What it has value that can't be traded, but still has value. Like, it's very hard to navigate that. The concept of soulbound, hard, doesn't really exist. That means that I can't give, or we can't give anything really useful, very interesting, because it just gets converted into cash immediately. So yes, it is there's a debate for sure about the value of the veteran DLI and whether it actually is a net positive or net negative thing. There are ways to improve the player experience, just like the redemption queue handling, like, I don't know, easy sell. I actually don't know, but there is a debate at the moment about the future of the veteran DLI for sure, and you can spin up a thread about that as well if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the way that it's done and the improvements, and that you can redeem them now to the home station, and that's all fantastic. It's just you got to put some stuff in there that people will actually leave, because the way it is right now, I think most people would rather not have a login reward than another Vexor blueprint. I think, because it's just filling up. Nobody's gonna build that Vexor. Like, I hate to break it to you, but nobody's building the Vexor.
It's a very hard. It's almost impossible to make it actually valuable. So maybe we need to rethink this in some way.
Okay.
But there's no way to give something valuable, like, except auto redeemed skins. Those are the only things we can actually say, okay, we can give something out that has value, because we know that you can't trade it to other accounts. That's the only thing.
Yeah, except for Signal 25s, those you can trade.
But we can trade like all of the other things, like the ships and the material.
Right.
Yep.
I have so before I would ask the mods if there are some questions in chat that were asked repeatedly, or that you find particularly good, do tag me in them and I'll ask the question in a second. I want to ask one last question, Rattati, and that is around the management of Plex prices. So you're a financial analyst, or you used to be. I used to be a financial analyst. The price of Plex and the supply and demand of Plex is economically speaking something very, very interesting in game, and I'm sure it's something that you spend a lot of time at least dealing with or thinking about. It has been, so Plex has been dropping a lot, which one reason is going to be a lot of maybe people returning to the war and buying Plex to skill up or to buy resources. Do you guys manage the price of Plex? What do you do? Do you have boundaries that it can't go over? You can look me in the eye and say no.
100%. It's literally supply and demand. We have zero impact on the Plex supply, demand, or prices.
So the introduction of a Plex sale has nothing to do with the current price of Plex at any point in time.
They're just based on a reasonable period of time that has lapsed, kind of like a gauge of the community of when is a good timing, but it's absolutely not based on trying to control the price at all. We think it's just a healthy, it's probably healthier now, but it's very hard to say what's healthy. What's the value of ISK? What's the relative value of ISK to real world currencies? This is an almost impossible problem to say what is good and what is bad. All we can say is what is the relative price of Plex when players are relatively happy about the game. And we definitely saw that players were unhappier about the game at a certain price point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty clearly because bots were driving Plex demand up because they had more ISK supply. They could just grind their own ISK, so they would be able to afford paying over the margin, over the kind of current margin of Plex. So it was driven up, and then kind of in this vicious cycle of them overpricing themselves and buying their own Plex, and so on and so forth. The players selling Plex do not seem to be a big portion of them are not price sensitive at all. They will simply sell Plex when they need cash. They don't care about the current prices, so they will just buy $20 and sell it. So they're not price sensitive. The buyers are more. So this is all just a kind of supply and demand cycle, which has been improved a lot by anti-cheat. That's what has driven the Plex prices down. And that actually, when I say we don't, we do, but we do it in a healthy way without manipulation.
Because you drove down the demand because there's less RMTers in the game.
Yes.
Or less bots.
Yes, and more punished RMTers. Less illegal ISK in the systems.
So would you say then the current Plex price is then more reflective of what it should be? Because
I think it's this is the same price that was in a good period back a few years ago. This is kind of like I don't know. There's nothing healthy about a number. It's just a number, and a lot of real world economies is really just perception. Like, what is a high price for gold? Like, whatever it is it higher, lower, good, bad? That just depends on how people feel about it. A lot of it is emotional, and this seems to be a nice emotional place for Plex to be, which makes people comfortable, and then people are happier about it. That it's weird, but it's not always science.
Okay. Are you okay with answering a couple of questions from chat?
Sure.
Bonsai, he's one of our mods, the state of Wormholes regarding resource distribution and PI are returning questions. Also, if CCP is happy with how the ESS numbers turned out. Let's start with the easy question. Are you happy with the way the ESS numbers turned out?
We are happy with the current ISK rates, or basically what players are making from bounties. Yes. And point two, we're very happy about the growth of reserve bank deposits when we release them to the public.
Is it do you know yet how you're going to release the keys? Can you share something about that?
Specific details I can't share, I know, but they will be distributed in content.
In content, so not through the Plex or store or cache.
It's such a, like, I would say come on, but
Hey, I'm
no.
just, I'm just making
Content, yes.
Okay. Yeah, just, I mean, the
I
thing
know.
is, the thing
um,
is, there's no better thing you can do for the I guess for the for the community, or for the sentiment in the community, than saying exactly what you just did, right? So I think it's up to me to ask that question. It's up to you to answer that, because
yeah, I just remember like the first Reddit thread about reserve banks, and I was like, okay, no, we're never gonna sell these keys for Plex or Secure. No, never.
That's good.
Okay, it's in content.
That's very good. So earlier, the other part of that question was the state of wormholes regarding resource distribution.
Yep, big part of the next phase in that sense.
Okay. And PI, well, PI is interesting, right? Because PI is something that that had the prices crashed. One reason is less structures in space. One reason is I guess more people doing PI because the other ISK making opportunities aren't as lucrative anymore. State of PI, do you have it's part of the ecosystem, do you have an opinion on it?
First of all, it could be so much more, and I have big fantasies about what PI could be. I'm a fairly big Forex player, and I think there's things we could do for PI that like it just has potential. PI is definitely some of the PI resources are going to have increased demand soon.
Okay.
So higher value for sure.
Ooh, you can't. Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. That's a good one to drop here. That's gonna drive up prices. You can watch the prices go up.
If you speculate, you speculate. Like I take no responsibility.
I probably have 500 billion in PI goods under my control, so that's all good. All right. I think we're gonna let you go, an hour 15, unless Bonsai Techno, was there any questions that I missed? One last question for Rattati here? Hypernet, yeah. Oh, actually, that's a good ending question, Rattati. You said earlier something about I don't know the exact quote, but you said, gambling was identified as a problem and removed. I mean, you reintroduced state-funded or state-run gambling via the Hypernet, something that I've been fighting against since it got introduced, because I don't really like the idea of gambling in the game the way the Hypernet was introduced. How does that fit together? How do you say, okay, we've removed gambling, but then we introduced it as kind of a state-run thing? And when I say state-run, I mean, you know what I mean. Because you're just taking advantage of mathematically challenged people. That's what you're doing, right?
It's raffles, and they are condoned everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it's not literally gambling. Mm-hmm. It is a numbers game for sure. A game of chance. Actually, like, I can't speak much to it. It was implemented like months before I, like literally just before I joined Eve. And I know that we went through like thorough legal review, and it's fine. Like, no, it's not wrong. And
I don't mean legally. I mean,
Yeah, I honestly morally just don't have a strong opinion on it. Okay. It's something that I think was, again, with good intentions. Obviously we had like semi-legal raffles going on in EVE that were then turned off. Like I don't know the history about that stuff. I think it was meant to be a kind of a good-natured, fun activity to, and I remember there were things. A big reason for this, now I'm kind of thinking about this, was to kind of get value for things that had no value. So super rare things that you couldn't just put on the market. And I think it's for that, I think it's, I guess, fine. Like I really don't have a problem with it, but I'm very ambivalent towards the whole thing. Gambling to me is this kind of non-guaranteed loot box rolling, like when you just have a percent, like a hidden usually percent chance, and there's no guarantee. So at least for loot boxes that I don't hate as much as the other ones, is kind of like, at least like if it's 1 in 100, you get, if you buy 100, you'll get the thing, like a guaranteed drop. But none of that is coming to EVE in any way or form anyway, so it doesn't really matter what I think.
Unfortunately, it came with a lot of scamming and spamming, but that's
yeah, I think
unfortunate.
it's unfortunate, but it, again, it doesn't bubble enough up to cause enough noise for anyone to really react negatively or positively. It's kind of working. It still has a lot of activity. A lot of people interact with it. So the assumption is it's as good as anything else in the game. Some people are having fun with it. It's a sandbox. If you don't really ever need to open it even. So I think that's what it is. It's gameplay for some, and so a lot of people enjoy it a lot. So I'm happy to let them keep doing it if they enjoy it.
I guess you have the numbers to prove that.
Yep. There's a lot of turnover for sure. It's a you can see it in the MER. There's a lot of sync involved in that. I would like to end on, like, I've been going through. It's kind of like we have a Friday fun session run by CCP Burger, where we go through all kinds of interesting things at the company, and something that we have a corporation, a small corporation run by, or like with CCP players, and they were just walking through their nullsec mining industry operation, and I think here is something that it's a big thing to tackle, but that's something that I'm very interested in trying to improve, which is basically how do we introduce new players into industry, because what they are walking into is basically an impossible task. It's PvP with odds stacked against you from every single, like direction. You basically have other people who have fully researched blueprints. You have like people with very optimized pipelines, logistics. Like there is no way you can win on margins against anyone. So how do we make this lucrative? And that's just a question for you guys to ponder. What can we do to allow new players to get into this and still make a living from it without fighting against the big sharks in the industry? Because there is no artisan cafe. There is nothing you can do to be different. It's all the same goods in that sense. It's all price is king here. There's no customer service. There's nothing that you can offer. So pose that question to you guys. What can we do for new players in the industry? Because that's like, you don't have a chance. That's my kind of feeling that I'm feeling right now.
You want an answer from chat?
Sure. Like,
get rid of T2 BPOs.
That's one, but they're not competing on the T2 market in the first week of their existence. But good point, but not a key point.
You sure that whatever you grant to new players will be used by the same titans they have no chance against? Yeah. You have to find the items that that work. So in Null, right? I tend to agree with you. I'm actually I'm an experienced trader, but in industry I only started this year, Rattati, and I was immediately able to make a profit by finding the right niches and the right items, with a lot of market knowledge, obviously, that helps. So I think giving them a platform to maybe to learn about the markets and the makeup of different items and structures, I think would be a good starting point. There's basically very few resources out there that will easily explain to you which type of items go into what type of final good and or finished good or medium tier 1 or P1 P2 intermediate products. That is something that I think is missing. So that is something that that I would say would help a lot of players on their way there. But yeah.
One thing that kind of struck me was that many MMOs, a lot of the survival games at least, like with crafting elements, with blueprints, etc., they allow you to make something for yourself, like, and it's useful to you, and it's almost never useful for you to manufacture for yourself. Like it's kind of better for you to go out and make money and buy things off the market, which is kind of counterintuitive. And I think there's also this complexity of the fitting itself, and our CCP kind of guide or host actually explained how they go about creating doctrine kind of orders. So, and that's a lot of Google Docs and a lot of Excel sheets and a lot of things where you actually have to keep track of everything, and
Absolutely.
Creating corporation hangars to make everyone like dump into the same hangar so you can keep track of all the minerals, etc. This is all very like abstract, very difficult for a new player to get into. Just the concept of I'm going to build my own rifter with my own weapons, with my own ammo. That seems to be like a reasonable thing to do for a new player who wants to get into industry, but it very, very difficult. Maybe as an intermediate to go dabble in industry, but as a new player who expects this to be a game also about crafting is something that like I'd love to take a stab at trying to improve.
So I would say something like so if you're talking about maybe one solution could be diminishing returns for people that produce a lot, right? That would allow on certain products would allow people to get into very cheap initial products and maybe make a profit because everyone else is not producing it anymore because of diminishing returns. But I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that would be good for the sandbox aspect of the game, because that's, I mean, we're playing ultra capitalism here. This is not going to be this is unrealistic, or this is unrealistic hand holding for new players that is hurting the sandbox mentality, I think. But that would be an idea maybe to throw around.
Sure. That's
diminishing
one
returns
way.
is always, that's all. Diminishing returns is always the answer to any question. Or a possible answer if you don't
want
to
to say tariffs though.
Exactly. No, that's over.
Taxes. No, right. That's basically just think about all the activity as PvP and think whether it's fair or not. And I think this is one of the unfair places to start, is like day one. I'm saying day one, not day 39 or 300.
You shouldn't be doing industry in null is my answer. Day one, because what are you doing? Industry is something that has to that should be really only really profitable at scale, because that's how it is in the real world. That's realistic. So I think if you're building
fun
your
never
own,
plays a part of it.
Well, fun. Well, fun is for different people. I think a lot of people produce at a loss, and Eve, a ton of people. Do you know, so many people produce at a loss because they have fun producing stuff, and I love them because I get very rich of them. But that's what happens. You know, it's people. I think the people that are very profitable in industry are the 20%, not the 80%. And so I don't think industry, for the sake of making a huge profit, is a month one activity. But to be fair, it's not in most MMOs, right? I mean, in other MMOs, if you're going to, I mean, you know, WoW is the elephant in the room. In WoW, you're going to start producing for yourself, just like you might be producing your own Rifter, but you're not going to be profitable in any profession until a few years down the line. But,
Sure.
you know, we digress.
Yep.
Hey, Rattati, thank you so much for coming along. Hopefully, we can do this again sometime. It was a ton of fun. I think we learned a lot. I think it was very, very nice speaking to you, and thank you so much for taking out the time of your evening. I know it's an extension of work for you. It's fun for us, an extension of work for you.
It's fine.
So I highly appreciate that, man.
I enjoy it. I really like the community interaction. I miss it. I did more of it on Dust, but I'm trying to get back into the habits. So, nope, I really enjoy this, and there's a lot of interesting things that can come out of both the chat, both the follow up. People actually watch the stream and then ping me. It's all very important to just keep this conversation going. And I hope I was vague enough, but not and also still, like, I would say. I hope you see some light at the end of the tunnel. I see it in the reserve packs. Just you wait.
All right. So perfect. Maybe if you if people reach out to voice their opinion based on the chat that we had today, what should they do? Should they tweet at you? Should they reach out to the community team? What's the best way to give feedback?
So my favorite is, because I check the forums regularly, is to just see a good, well constructed post. If you name drop me, it's likelier that I see it. But that's one of the ways. Probably a good one is to start a thread and then tweet it at me. And community team, I guess, would be like, they pass all kinds of things. Like I get a regular bundle, and then we have a weekly kind of community feedback. So, like, I think these are normal ways to get in touch.
Great, cool. Well, I'll be doing that, and you can be sure that you will have another request for an interview in the future from me in your inbox.
See you next quadrant.
All right. Thank you, Rattati. So we're to everyone else in the stream, we're still going to do the Oz report because it's Monday. And so we're gonna I'm gonna get a drink real quick, take a 3 to 4 minute break, and then we're gonna be back for the Oz report. All right, Rattati, thank you, man.